The New York Giants have a pretty major decision to make after the 2024 NFL season ends, and it revolves around starting quarterback Daniel Jones. Ever since Jones came into the league in 2019, he seems to be one of those players that everyone has an opinion on. Whether you like him, hate him, think he's okay, everyone seems to think they know what the Giants should do with Daniel Jones. And after 5 years, we've got to see Daniel Jones, his play on the field, and what exactly he can produce. It begs the question, should the Giants move on from Daniel Jones when they have the opportunity, or do they double down and stick with the guy who has led them to the playoffs, but also is likely the cause of much of the mediocrity that we've seen over the past couple of years? And in this video, we're going to try to answer those questions. We're going to take a look at Daniel Jones, the Giants, and why, quite frankly, it might be best for these two to just part ways after this season ends. But before we get into that, be sure to smash that thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I'm Omer Q for Real Take Sports. Let's dive in. So quarterback Daniel Jones came into the NFL under very interesting circumstances because he was drafted number 6 overall to the New York Giants, who still had Eli Manning as their quarterback at the time. And while Eli's career was winding down, it was pretty big shoes for Daniel Jones to come in and try to fill. Eli Manning was someone who not only led the Giants for the past over decade up until then, but he also led them to 2 Super Bowl victories. Not just 2 Super Bowls, 2 Super Bowl victories. And in the grand scheme of things, when you're talking about how a quarterback is remembered, how a quarterback is beloved, or how much they're beloved, those things matter greatly, especially in a market like New York that is as cutthroat and as vicious as it comes. The New York media, quite frankly, is one of the most obnoxious and critical media groups in the entire country. And if you're not good, they're going to tell you you're not good. And if you're great, they're going to ask, why aren't you better than this guy? That's just how it goes. And coming into that market as a young quarterback, as Eli Manning would even tell you, is one of the most difficult things to do. But Jones came in 2019 and did not have a lot of immediate pressure put on him. And a lot of the reasons why the Giants drafted him at the time was they were preparing for the future. And they believed that Jones was the guy. And they looked at some of the things that scouts were saying about him coming into the draft as things that made him their guy. One of the biggest advantages that Jones had going into the draft that year was that he was the prototypical size of an NFL quarterback, standing 6'5", 220 pounds, combining good athleticism with his size. He was able to move around well in the pocket and had the ability to make plays with his legs. People heralded his football IQ coming out of Duke under head coach David Cutcliffe. Jones was praised for his IQ, poise under pressure, and ability to read defenses. He was even seen as a quarterback who could process information quickly and make those decisions in real time at the NFL level. Work ethic, leadership, as well as the experience playing in a pro NFL style offense all made Jones an appealing pick and one of the top prospects right up there with Kyler Murray and Dwayne Haskins going into the 2019 draft. And for the New York Giants, this was enough. After the Arizona Cardinals had picked Kyler Murray with the number 1 overall pick that year, it seemed to be a toss-up between Haskins and Jones. And you could argue that Daniel Jones had a bigger upside than some of the other quarterbacks. And this was even said that Daniel Jones arguably was going to be better than Kyler Murray. And while we've seen how that turned out, the reality is that Daniel Jones was drafted because people saw the potential in him. He was heralded because people thought that if he lived up to his potential, he could be one of those guys who leads teams to multiple Super Bowl victories, much like Eli Manning. And in many ways, you could say that he was a lot like Eli Manning in that he was a more low-key guy, didn't have a brash and bold personality, but he let his play on the field do the talking. And all that is great, but if we go back and look at Daniel Jones at Duke, it's not like he was lighting up the scoreboard there in North Carolina. In fact, Daniel Jones was pretty average when you're talking about quarterbacks in college football at the time. His best season came in 2018 in his senior season at Duke, where he only went 6-5 as a starter, throwing 22 touchdowns to 9 interceptions and completing just over 60% of his passes. And Jones wasn't a guy who was throwing the ball for an exorbitant amount of yards either. He wasn't the guy who had even a very high passing yards per attempt stat. I think the most he had was 6.9 in his senior year, which, again, if we're just looking at that in a vacuum, that does not eliminate you from playing football. It does not eliminate you as a starting quarterback, but it makes it an odd decision that you pick him at the number 6 overall pick when you did have a quarterback in Eli Manning, who you could argue was the guy who could still lead your team and maybe is also a guy who deserved to finish out his final year without the pressure of a young quarterback behind him. But at the end of the day, the Giants were banking on Daniel Jones reaching his potential behind Eli Manning and then eventually becoming the star quarterback that they believed him to be. It just never worked out that way. And if we look back at Daniel Jones' rookie season, there were early signs that he was going to be good. Jones even broke some NFL rookie records in his first year as a quarterback. Most passing touchdowns in a single game by a rookie with 5. He was the first rookie to have 3 games with 4 passing touchdowns and no interceptions. And on top of that, he broke a bunch of Giants rookie records too. So Jones flashed brilliance early, and above all, he had the poise of a starting quarterback, which, if you don't have the skill level of a Lamar Jackson, a Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen, if you have the poise, that can get you pretty far in the NFL. And I'm not saying that you can be a starter or a franchise guy based off of that, but you can play in this league. In his rookie year, he finished with a record of 3-9, but threw for 24 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. It was expected for that to carry on into his sophomore year, but that didn't happen. And some of the cons going into the draft for Daniel Jones were brought to the spotlight in his sophomore year. In his second year as quarterback for the New York Giants, Jones went 5-9 as a starter, throwing for only 11 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. And again, the arm strength, turnover concerns, durability, and lack of flashy playmaking ability, all of which were things that people were criticizing Jones for going into the 2019 draft, reared their ugly head. And this play continued into the 2021 season, where the Giants once again missed out on the playoffs. The Giants once again were unable to really show any progression, and Jones' play on the field was not that of the starting guy. And that third year is very important, because now we're talking about contracts. Now we're talking about extensions. Now we're talking about whether the Giants want Daniel Jones to be the long-term answer at quarterback. And in 2022, it was up to Jones to prove that he was the guy. And all the pressure was on him. And you could argue that he actually made strides, as in 2022, he not only had one of his most efficient years as starting quarterback, but he also led the Giants to the playoffs with a lot of help from his supporting cast. Mind you, Saquon Barkley, you could argue, was the real impact player on that team. But Jones was good enough to make the play when it was there and also not mess it up for his team, which was something that he was criticized for in the 3 years previous. They even went on to win a playoff game in 2022, which led the New York Giants to giving Daniel Jones a contract extension. In March of 2023, the New York Giants gave Daniel Jones a 4-year, $160 million contract with $92 million guaranteed at signing, giving him an average salary of $40 million per year and an additional $35 million in potential incentives based on performance. To put it bluntly, Daniel Jones got the proverbial bag, and it wasn't just a small bag, it was a pretty major one. Jones at this point became one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the entire league. But along with that contract came a caveat. The New York Giants had an out after the 2024 season. And if they chose to release Daniel Jones, they could avoid the bulk of his 2025 salary, limiting the financial liability to just bonuses, and a small dead cap hit. So for the Giants, they were able to pay a guy in Daniel Jones who was, again, efficient in 2022, able to keep the ship on the right track, but also have an out in case they felt like things weren't working out. And in 2023, they were kind of right about that last part because things went as bad as they possibly could. Jones suffered an injury. He would go 1-5 as the starting quarterback that year, eventually going down and only having 2 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Worst of his career by far. And then he's followed it up this year in 2024 by playing what can only be described as bad football and a different style of football, honestly, than we've seen Daniel Jones play. Because before, one of the things you couldn't say about Daniel Jones was that he looked like he didn't have poise. There were times where Daniel Jones made decisions that were quite frankly boneheaded. There were times where Daniel Jones made throws that were kind of suspect, but at no point did you think that Daniel Jones wasn't comfortable or didn't feel like he was playing with poise. And again, poise is one of the biggest factors in maintaining a quarterback's confidence. And at this point, it seems like Daniel Jones is a little broken, and I think it's mostly a product of where he is. Jones, quite frankly, is a good quarterback, and I'm not afraid to say that. That doesn't mean he's the franchise guy. At the end of the day, in order to be the franchise guy, you have to have the ability to elevate your teammates, and I don't think that that's something that Daniel Jones has. He can be one of those guys who's there to right the ship. He can be one of those guys who's there to manage the game, but he's never going to be the guy to make those game-changing plays week in, week out. And when you're talking about a franchise quarterback, that's a quality they need to have. And the fact that Jones doesn't have it doesn't mean that he can't play in the NFL. As I said before, Jones is a good quarterback. I think that Jones could even be one of the best backups in the entire league next year. But I don't believe that he's going to be playing for the Giants. And I don't believe that the Giants believe that he's going to be the guy to lead them to the promised land. The New York Giants drafted Daniel Jones on a bet that he would develop into one of the best and most intelligent quarterbacks in the league. And while we don't know whether or not that is true at this point, one thing we do know is he's just not the guy. But let me know in the comment section what you guys think. Do you guys think Daniel Jones is indeed the quarterback of the future for the Giants? Should they keep him? Should he stick around? Or should they just move on and see what else is out there? I want to hear from you in the comments. Also, be sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released.